Good evening, everyone. I have 7 o'clock and I'll call the meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is Central Park Pool. So, Mr. Lasher, I think you have something there you're going to present for us.
Okay, so we've talked about the Central Park pool. We've got some issues with the plaster coming off, and it's been causing some rough surfaces and some stub toes and things like that. So we've got an issue we've got to deal with. Brian's here to answer questions, and he's done some research as well. So a little bit about the Central Park pool. It was built in '05. Cost is about almost $800,000. It was originally built to be an HOA pool. So when Central Park was developed, the city was the developer of that. And all of Central Park that's now here, that's platted between south of 53rd, between Woodlawn and Rock, as well as what's now Elk Creek, was all part of that HOA. And so that's why the pool is the size it is. But that's also why there's no amenities. So you can see the pool, it's just a 0 entry and then to 5 foot. And there's no diving boards or anything like that because it was originally designed to be a neighborhood pool, a large one. And then over the years, Central Park got divided. The 80 acres where Elk Creek was sold, and they created their own HOA. And then some of the different developments within Central Park kind of split off and became their own HOAs because of maintenance that was being done by the HOA, et cetera, et cetera. So the HOA that was really to manage this became smaller and smaller. And the city, because when it was originally built, the HOA didn't bring in enough dues to pay to run the pool. The city actually started running as a municipal pool, and that's why we have lifeguards, because it's a municipal pool. And and then it has hours and things like that. You know, your typical HOA pool, they can come and go as they like. There's no set hour, or there's usually set hours, but there's no lifeguards and things like that. So the annual debt service is about $41,000 a year. It'll be paid off in 2030. There's about $327,000 left on it. So it's about 17 years old. There's several issues with it. When it was built, the area that it was built in has a high water table, and we've had issues where we've had a lot of moisture, and we've had water that's come up through the pool. It holds water year round. That's why it was built the way it was. We got plaster coming off. The plaster was installed about 7 years ago, so it averages 7 to 10 years. So that's why we're having the issues. So we've looked at a few options. One option would be to put a liner in it. And you've probably seen pools that have liners in them. Gets rid of the plaster. The installation's going to run $50,000 to $75,000. The other issue that we've talked with companies that do this, and the concern that they have and we have, is that if there's groundwater coming up, is that going to push that liner up? Some concerns like that. So they've all recommended, before we put a liner in, we need to do some additional work, maybe put in some additional drainage, and look at those things. And that could run, $20,000 to $75,000, or who knows how much, would depend on what they would find there. So that would be work that would need to be done before the liner was put in. But the liner does have a 10-year warranty. It does solve the issue with the plaster. It would be smooth, and the plaster would be removed. Next option would be just to replaster it. That's $32,000 roughly to do that. Again, it lasts 7 to 10 years. Downside is it's a rough surface. That's what our issue is now. So what your decision, you have several options to consider. One is to replaster the pool. The 7 to 10 years would last till it's paid off. Put in a new liner. It's got a 10-year warranty that solves the rough surface. Again, it'd be last until it was paid off. Close the pool, and that solves a lot of issues and saves a lot of money, but that's a decision. Or you could replace it with a splash pad at the same location. So put a little, again, the question is going to be, well, what's that cost? So worked with PEC, they've actually designed and installed some splash pads in existing locations. And so they put together some information for me. So this would be a very small splash pad, 65 to 75,900 square foot. So it's small. That includes the design work, the installation. It doesn't include the shipping, the utility work, some of the other mechanical system enclosure, which the nice thing about relocating it here is we've got the building there. So we could use that for restrooms and to put all the mechanical equipment in. And then, of course, if there's any issues with the no landscaping, parking, that kind of stuff, which we already have the parking there as well. So this would really be the installation of that type of splash pad. Now, we've seen a lot nicer, bigger splash pads. So here's one that's about 1,200 square foot. You're looking at 100,000 roughly. 1,200 square foot is that's the average size of a house. So if you think about the footprint of your house, that would be the size of that. Then you get a little nicer, a little bigger, 2,800 square foot, about 165 to 175. And then it depends on what kind of things you want on it. Like this has got a spillway and stuff. You're looking at 200,000. That's about 2,800 square foot. Again, just the more amenities you add, the nicer amenities, the more it costs. And then here's one that's about 3,300 square foot that you're looking at 250,000 roughly for that. And just to put it in perspective, this is the current pool. So the pool itself is about 4,300 square foot. So thinking about how that would fit in here, one that's about 3,200 would cover this area here. Yes.
Would we have to put the splash pad where the pool is, or could we put it like to the north of the existing building?
Yeah, you could put it anywhere. The things that aren't covered are like which there's already a fence there. So if you wanted to use the fence, you'd fill it in and put it in the same location. But no, you don't have to put it here. You can put it anywhere around here. The nice thing is that we just want to be able to use the parking and then the building.
My thought on that question was that we could put in a low-end splash pad to the north of the building to last a while and see how it worked. And then if we wanted to, we could rehab the pool later instead of doing that.
Certainly do that. Yeah, it's really up to you. Yeah.
How deep is the pool now? What's
so
the deepest?
The pool is, and that's the unique thing about it is, again, the way it was designed is, so this area here is a 0 entry to 5 foot.
Mm-hmm.
And then this area over here is 5 foot. So the 5
It's
foot
only
is
5 foot is the depth?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
So it's not deep enough for a diving board then?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's
Okay.
why none of that's there.
Okay.
Yep.
Groundwater should probably make it cost prohibitive to make it deeper than that.
Yeah, I'm sure. And then I think that the fact that it was just going to be a neighborhood pool and didn't want all the liability of all
That'd be
those kind of
rebuilt.
things.
It's already an issue going down another 5
Right.
feet so you can dive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and I don't know, I mean, around here, they put drain tiles around the houses, but I don't know if drain tiles were put in here when that was installed.
Yeah.
We may
Brian
not-
would know.
Were they?
that.
Okay, didn't do the
This
job.
was not done with drain tile. Typical municipal pools do have that.
Uh-huh,
It's similar to your basement, where they have drain
Right.
tile, plumbing, and sump pumps, and pretty much like your basement.
but this wasn't done that way?
This was not designed because your insurance was gonna be double if you had a deeper pool and diving boards.
Oh,
And so that was the consideration for doing the smaller, shallower pool.
okay.
Was liability.
With the splash pad setup, do you still need to do like lifeguards and things like that?
Oh.
I assume not.
And then the hours would be different. I mean, you could open a splash pad, in May and close it in October or September, depending on the weather.
What's the water usage of a splash pad? Does it reuse water or is it used?
It does. You have a holding tank somewhere, which this doesn't really have, so that would have to be added. And then it's reclaimed and it's circulated and treated just like pool water is.
Okay.
So there's two ways you can do it. In talking with PEC, you can do the reclaimed, costs a little bit more because you have to have more equipment, or you can just run it into the sewer system. That's cheaper because you're not reclaiming it. But if that was something we wanted to explore, we would look into both of those, what they cost.
But you've got a system there already that already chlorinates, right? And automatic chlorinators and that kind of thing.
It may or may not be able to be.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the other consideration that, obviously, if we close the pool, you're going to hear some concerns.
Oh, yeah.
We have people that use it. The thing about it, though, with the type of pool that is, when you go look, it's usually toddlers to 10-year-olds, because that's who likes that type of pool. When they get older and they want all the slides and everything, they go to the North Y. Because there's the wave pool and everything like that. So again, who is utilizing the splash pads? It's that same age group. So they would still have that same age group would still have something to do. It'd just be different.
Do we have any kind of usage information where the customers of the pool live? Are they spread throughout the city or are they mostly a couple of blocks away?
I don't know. Have you ever done anything about where they're coming from?
We used to track that better when the homeowners associations were involved, but we don't really do that now. We charge a day fee, and I mean, we can get our membership data and let you know where our members are from. They're probably 75-80% Bel Aire residents. Most of the usage comes from Bel Aire, but we do get outside people.
Even within Bel Aire, I'd like to know.
Yeah.
Because if one of the arguments to keep this is that it's a community benefit. And if it's a community benefit, I want to see that the entire community is benefiting.
Yeah, now I can tell you that, it typically breaks even. Now, breaking even does not include Brian's time and the staff that they go over and they maintain it and do all that. That doesn't include debt service. It's just the lifeguards and, the electricity and stuff. And as Brian said, when the covenants were put together in Central Park, it was required that the HOA pay dues to the pool. But as the city, the developer got out of it and the majority lot owners became HOA residents, then they changed the covenants and took that out. So that's when Brian says that we used to get $20,000 a year in revenue from the HOA, and now it's from HOA members. It's that actually just join. It's $5,000. So
I was just going to comment. This time last week, I was talking to the constituents that brought up the cut fee. And I thought I was going to be all gung-ho on biting the bullet and spending the money for a liner. But after going to the conference this past weekend and talking to people about a liner is putting a Band-Aid over this groundwater issue, and thinking further about, we're not San Diego, 3 months at best, because like this year in crazy Kansas weather, it was too cold to open when we wanted to on Memorial Day. And then, and correct me if I'm wrong, but because of staffing, we don't even stay open till Labor Day. It's really more like early August that we're closing down.
It runs from Memorial Weekend till when school starts.
Yeah. So I think I'm more in favor of a splash pad. Also, just as the parent of a special needs kid, that splash pad is more inclusive. That's something that we can do. And then from the taxpayer standpoint, not having to have lifeguards and the much longer usage of it, I think I'm really for maybe headed towards a splash pad, but I kind of like John's idea of not tying ourselves in just yet. depending on what we could reuse, like if we shut the pool down and it would be a huge savings to put the splash pad there, that's one thing. But I think that's a very interesting idea of giving it a shot with the splash pad and seeing if we really do want to get rid of this pool.
I think one of the things that we might want to keep in mind, we have a potential development across the street from the City Hall. At one time, when we talked about putting a park there, we talked extensively about putting a splash pad in that park. Now, that design has been shelved, and it wasn't really designed; it was really a concept. But that concept was shelved, and I do not know how that will evolve right now. But if it evolves into a park, it could well end up with a splash pad, or it might not. I don't know. In a way, I'm not excited about the liner either, from information I got over the weekend and knowing this water table problem. In a way, I'm kind of thinking maybe we should just go and replaster it now and see what develops over the next few years. The replastering will at least give us 7 years, and you've got about 8 years left on the debt service. Is that right?
Yeah, 2030.
Yeah.
We paid off.
So at least give you a little breathing room. You can see what develops and then say from there what makes sense with this. But I agree. This pool probably is not something that we can say 20 years from now we'll still have. It just doesn't look like it's got that capability.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious that this is a neighborhood pool, and it's obvious that it has some design issues with the water table. It's going to be one of those things that's a constant fight to keep it open. In my opinion, I think if the community, if the city wants to have a pool, we should probably do a real municipal pool, which is a whole different scale of project. And I talked with a number of people at the conference this weekend as well, and pools were something that came up in at least 2 of my discussions, and everyone would be happier if they didn't have one. It was my takeaway is that lots of folks have pools that they wish they didn't have because of the headaches with it. And, and I realize that's a staff perspective, not a community perspective. But when I think about, somebody with a 2-year-old, what I would value as a community member right now, I get a lot more value out of the splash pad than the pool. And so I personally find that a lot more exciting.
As a previous owner of a pool, I echo that feeling about pools.
And with the Y so close, they're a strong competitor to anything we would do. I don't think there's any way we could financially compete with them.
Yeah, I'll kind of piggyback on what John said. I kind of agree. I'd want to know what the data says, but my feeling is we don't want our public pool to be an attraction to bring a ton of people from outside of Bel Aire. So it seems a little bit of a waste to spend a ton of money on the pool trying to make it better, because it's probably not gonna. We don't want it to attract people. We want to support the local community, and it feels like the splash pad is more inclusive. I'd also say what Mayor had to say about the development here. I guess I see trying to think about how those two parts might work together if that corner does develop, and how that's walkable, and that the amenities over there could be more park focused and more action focused, and the amenities over here could be more gathering place focused. So I kind of like the idea of a splash pad, but I don't know, I'm kind of 50-50 on whether or not we leave ourselves open to reopening the pool. I don't know. I would have to probably see some more data to know if that would be a benefit, just based on cost. Like you said, reusing the building, potentially installing new equipment, and the cost difference there. But this is certainly something that a lot of cities are doing or considering. So I don't think we're way off base by any means. And I think, like everybody has said, that we're not going to compete with those other attractions. And maybe someday in the future, Bel Aire will have a large development along 254, and there'll be more regional attraction type things that can be considered, like a water park or something like that. But obviously this neighborhood isn't a place for something like that. So
How long do you think we can go without doing anything to the pool? Is it something we'd have to do before the next season, or could we
So that,
Maybe
yeah,
get
that's,
another
and
year.
that's exactly where I was going as we talk about timeline. And to back up, just throw out a number. I was looking at what Wichita had spent, because they've been turning some of theirs into splash pads and then rebuilding some pools. They're budgeting about 6.7 million for a new pool. That's kind of what
For
their
a new pool.
new pool, 6.7 million. So yeah, the issue when this was originally plastered the first time, we did it in the spring, and we had issues because the water table came up, and we had plaster popping off, so it had to be redone. So everybody has told us that if you're going to replaster it or do the liner, either one, do it in the fall. So I don't think we're going to want to do anything in the spring. So the question would be, do we still open it as it is and then plan to do something in the fall? So that gives you some time to think about that. The other thing is, since it sounds like there's interest in it, in a splash pad, I talked to some of the vendors there at the conference, and they said, we'd be happy to come and look and see, kind of come up with some renderings and kind of some estimates for you at no charge, and maybe give you some ideas to look at that as well. As you think about, maybe that's an option. So,
If you're going to replaster, you're going to be doing it before the end of November, I surmise.
Yes.
Is that
yes,
accurate?
yeah.
I mean, I don't think you can get in December and still do that kind of work.
No, we would do it right after the pool closes.
It's already closed.
It's
I
not
mean,
gonna
next
happen
year,
this
next
year, is what I'm
September,
saying.
we'd open it. And then,
They're all booked.
yep, they're all booked.
So the question is, if we are going to keep the pool, we can reopen it as it is, or we can not open it.
Mhm.
That's basically the option
Yep.
for next year.
Does it make any sense to, and I know you'd have to drain the pool to do this, but would it make any sense to go and drain it and try to at least smooth some of those rough spots off?
That's what we did. That's what we do year to year.
Oh, you do that year to year?
When we open the pool, we usually drain it in April, but you're always looking at the weather.
Yeah.
And we've got about a 3 or 4 day window depending on the weather. And we clean it and we patch it and we smooth it. But you're still gonna have issues.
Yeah, you're still going to have some problems.
You have issues
Okay.
with concrete pool. I mean,
So-
it's not a plaster pool, it's a concrete pool.
So the city employees do that work, or we hire somebody out?
We have done both. And this past year, we had a pool company help us do that. And
Okay,
They did replace the plaster and smooth some areas for us.
Okay, my lead in was, could we drain the water tomorrow and patch it next week and then fill it back up?
If you
To get
find
through the
some way
winter?
to do it.
Well, that's why I was asking if our employees
Yeah.
did it.
We
If,
don't have
if-
staff to do that.
okay, if we don't have staff, then that's
We
a
have-
non-issue.
We have part-time staff and summer staff, and
Okay,
we just don't have that manpower
Okay.
available right now.
so that means it has to be next year.
Brian, talking to one of the vendors this weekend, he mentioned something regarding the replastering about sandblasting. What are your thoughts on that? Or, that might smooth it out, be an option.
I've heard both sides, and the company that did give us the quote does not do that. They go in and they'll chip out anything that's loose. They will acid etch it, they will patch it if it's uneven, and then they'll put a bonding agent on it, and then they'll put another coat of plaster.
But that's not considered replastering, doing that? Oh, that is replastering. Okay.
But in,
Sandblasting typically comes into play when you have a coated or a painted surface, which you cannot paint plaster very effectively. I've heard of people that have tried it and it peels right off. They think that they would get a year or two Band-Aid out and put it in the epoxy coating on it, and it fails. And a lot of that is because of the groundwater issues or pool wasn't dry or wasn't applied properly. It's just a gamble is what it is.
I guess from my perspective, I'd like to see those options and those quotes from some of those vendors that you talked to. I think that knowing what that looks like and going ahead and starting to gather some of that information would be really good. I think it would also probably inform whether to leave the existing pool in place or not, because your design is probably going to look a lot different if it's there versus if it's not. And so I think that'll be informative for that decision as well.
I think it'd be good to see that. So I think what I'm hearing timeline wise, we'll probably open the pool next year. You'll do what work you need to do to make it a little more palatable for the feet. And then we'll look at a longer term solution here. And I'm not saying a long-term solution, just a longer term solution, but maybe a long-term solution too. I don't know. We'll have that crystal ball. So.
One thing I'll throw out there too is the idea of it being a potential amenity that's walkable from City Hall or any other development is when we're considering where it goes, what else we could put in that area, because there is Central Park there and that's all city-owned land. So it would be nice to see the cost, and then we could kind of weigh the cost versus placement versus potential, master plan of what additional amenities you could add to that area. That may be something you don't want to cram in over here. That's just my thoughts too.
Might be something to think about. I don't know that I envision, maybe I have the wrong vision about it, but I can't see people walking between here and over there. I just don't see people doing that. Now, maybe I'm wrong about that, but
It's not really that far if you
No,
walk it.
I
It's
know.
only a couple of blocks.
I know it is.
Even for me, it's not that far.
I know it is only a couple blocks. It's
Mayor,
just-
where I was
just
going
don't
with
know.
that is there's extra parking there. There's a park for children. This is a child amenity.
Right.
The dog park idea that came up, like a lot of that stuff that was added in that list of things just doesn't really fit the vision of the gathering space.
Right.
This area, maybe it fits better.
Yeah, I think that's a good.
So
That's a good
that's just my
idea.
thought is we
Yeah.
keep a master plan thought on it as we move forward.
Make it more of a kids play type area, but
Well, and
more
if you think
expanded.
about city events too, you could even structure some of your city events to where some of the more child-focused activities were over in a location
Right.
like this, like your petting zoos or whatever, because there's a lot of extra space there and a lot of parking. And I think the concepts that we've seen for the gathering space and the revised area, it's going to be a smaller gathering space, and maybe it wouldn't be good to use up a big chunk of that with a splash pad setup.
okay.
Did you have more, Ty? I
Nope.
kind of cut into you and then everybody started asking questions.
Nope,
so-
nope,
He was
that's,
done.
that was it. It's just more of a kind of a direction. We've got time. And so we just wanted to, throw out the ideas and have you give us the direction to go. And I think I've got that, Mayor.
And Brian, just telling our people that we're concerned about the feet, that we would just fix it up as best we can and still do the water shoe thing and all that.
I can pretty much tell you it's the first 2 or 3 weeks we have issues. After that, we don't hear anymore. So it's typically as they get acclimated to that water and the day campers are going there once or twice a week, their feet toughen up. And this is a problem that not only our pool has, any concrete pool has this. You can ask the country club pools or even the coated surfaces have this
Okay.
issue. It's something that does happen in the pool. It's gonna happen in the splash pad. You're gonna have the concrete and the brick and the deck around the splash pad. It's gonna have the same problem as the pool has. Kids go in there and they sit in that for 3 or 4 hours. Their feet get wrinkled like we do in the bathtub or the hot tub, and they scrape their foot or they're jumping and playing or they're jamming their foot into the steps. It happens. And it's happened since day one of this pool. My sister runs a country club pool, happens with her pool. And it happens with concrete type of surfaces. It's just the nature of it, unfortunately.
Okay. I think we give you some direction on that. I think. You think?
sir. Okay, so our next topic is engineering of 45th Street. And so we all know, and we've heard the condition of 45th Street from Woodlawn to Oliver and how rough that is, and it's not getting any better. And so really we know that the permanent solution is to replace it, just like we're doing on Woodlawn. We would, as part of that, we're guesstimating a 12.5 million. That's with the sidewalks and either a 2 or 3 lane. We signalized the intersection of Oliver. It is on the WAMPO tip, but it's not funded. We just had a meeting today with WAMPO to talk about options and stuff of how we can move this up, because it's programmed for when, Ann?
26.
Since it's not funded, it's not programmed for a specific year, but we did ask for 25, 26
Okay.
in our initial ask.
Okay. So we're looking at hoping 25, 26. We know that because we just came through the Oliver that it takes at least a year to do the design work. So the question that you have is, when do we want it done? And so the short-term solution is the mill and overlay. You're looking at about 300,000 for that stretch. Probably need some base repairs at about 50,000. Average life is 5,000. You could probably, or 5 years. You could probably push it out a little bit more, but that's where they pull up the top 2 inches, mix it back in and lay it back down. It's kind of a mill and overlay. So again, that's the short term. That doesn't solve all the issues with drainage and sidewalks and everything like that.
If we took that approach, would that widen the side of the road?
The shoulders?
The shoulders, yes.
The mill
Because
and
there
overlay.
Well, you're talking about rebuilding some of the base, so would we be able to widen the shoulders or not? How much would that add? Do we have any wild idea?
I don't have any idea. Do you have any guesstimates on
No,
why
I
that
don't,
show?
because that would likely require pushing the ditches out, which would require an extension to all the storm sewer. That's just not gonna be feasible without a lot of cost. You're probably looking at close to $750 to $1 million if you were going that route.
Because you have to put new ditches in and everything because you're
Right.
widening.
I was thinking most of the way there was enough land there already, but
So, the decision, the thought process is you want to do something short term, buy us 5 years. We could just go in and just do the patchwork and not do the mill and overlay. That takes care of some of those bumps and things like that. Or we hire an engineer with the goal to replace it in 3 years. The issue that we're going to run into is if the longer that it takes us to get the engineering done, the longer that pushes the project out. So that's kind of what we ran into with Woodlawn that took so long, was the engineering and such. I think Ann really guesstimated from hiring a contractor to when it's actually bid could take 2 years. Hire the engineer, getting it engineered, getting all the bid documents and things like that. So to do the permanent solution, to rebuild it like what we're doing Woodlawn, it's a minimum of 2 years before we could ever get started. So you have to decide, okay, do you want to start today from 2 years and hope we can get it done? Or do you want to wait 2 years and then know you got 2 years on top of that to get it done? So that's the thought.
Ty, kind of considering that timeline. So you're thinking engineering's 2 years, construction's probably 2 years. So this is probably a 4 or 5 year from when it's done.
Mhm.
Just so we kind of throw that out there. It's not really a 2 to 3 year deal. It's a 5+ year deal.
So, and of course,
Depending on
so
phasing.
that speeds it up. And we are looking at, that was our meeting today, is there a way that we could maybe do what's called advanced construction through WAMPO, where we would get some funding allocated to us, and then we'd actually start the project and then receive our funding over a few years. We're still looking at that. We don't have the answers for you today, but that's a possibility. Or we may have to wait until it's actually funded, which could be in 2026. And then we've got 2 years of engineering after that. So 26, 27, 28, and then it would be done by 2030.
Would this be the same as the Woodlawn project in that the WAMPO funds wouldn't pay for the engineering?
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So regardless, Bel Aire pays 100% of the engineering cost.
Right.
Yep.
It's just a matter of when you shell out that money.
Exactly. Yep.
So one of the questions on the 50,000, the patch, is that just the section like from Sunrise East to Woodlawn, or is that goes the whole length of the street?
That
Other-
would be just individual patches, so where there's depressions in the pavement or
Mhm.
holes or what have you, it would just be patches, kind of like we've done on 53rd Street
Okay.
multiple times.
Would it make any sense, and would it even be feasible to come back over that with a slurry seal to try to help that life of that so they don't break down so fast? I know the surface of that street, I think, is in better shape than, or the subsurface is in better shape than 53rd is. So I'm just wondering if that makes any sense.
That's certainly doable. We can come back with a microsurfacing treatment or a slurry seal. The microsurfacing we're gonna be looking at doing on several roads. We're getting it out, should have those numbers to, I believe, the end of November. But it could be something that could be added on to that. Costs, I'm not sure, but it would be less than the mill and overlay.
Right. Okay. So just in my thinking on this is that it's real clear in WAMPO's policy that they are driven to do advanced construction, but they've never done it with anybody but Wichita. So it's kind of unusual for them, but and one of their policy documents says 50% of their work should be advanced construction. They're not doing 50% of their work in advanced construction right now. So there's a bit of a drive to get there, but they don't know how to do it. And that's one of the things we got to go find out how to do it. Because Wichita is a special situation. They are certified by KDOT to manage their own construction projects, but we're not. And so when Wichita can do advanced construction, they're managing those projects. And so that's a different animal in that respect. So my feel is that we should be as prepared to get this road going as we can be with engineering work. I also want to add that we had a presentation at WAMPO today that the Federal Highway Administration is really pushing safe streets. And they even actually said they're looking for roundabouts. And I don't know for sure, but I would think that maybe they would probably pay for a lot of that if we could. That there's not a program out there right now, but they've had a very extensive presentation. Both the U.S. Department of Transportation gave a extensive presentation, and KDOT followed that with their own presentation about safe streets and reducing. Their goal is 0 deaths in traffic accidents by pedestrian, by car, by anything. And everybody so right now is recognizing that roundabouts and these double diamond interchanges you're seeing in some of the other cities, particularly in Olathe, we see that a lot in the Overland Park area. Those double diamond interchanges where you're actually on the opposite side of the road for a little bit. It's a little weird, feels strange, but hey, it works. It really does work. And I think that we would be wise to expand that scope to bring that in because I think that's where we're going to see everything go. You're already seeing that over in Valley Center and the Park City area now. They've already got projects. Some of them are already complete. So it's kind of, I think for a safety perspective, it's just really needed. One other thing I remember from a year or two ago, Johnson County per capita, and they have a higher population than Sedgwick County, but per capita, they have a lower traffic death rate than Sedgwick County does. I think that's because they do all that, because roundabouts and double diamonds and that kind of thing. Nobody's been able to tell me for affirmatively that's what it is or what it is that's the reason. But I do know that KDOT has observed that difference in traffic deaths.
Well, I'm looking at $50,000 to patch, and that doesn't sound like much to me considering what we spent in other places. So I don't think it's in that awful a shape. And that's something we probably are going to spend no matter what. So that's something we should be doing. And I'm okay with hiring an engineer next year or the year after to go ahead and get a plan. And based on what I'm hearing, I don't think the mill and overlay is worth the money if we're going to be rebuilding the road in 4 or 5 years. That's just my opinion.
I think I completely agree with that. I think the mill and overlay, if we're going to start right now and start hiring the engineer to do the design work and get this moving, then we shouldn't just throw the money away on the mill and overlay. We'll do the patches. We'll live with the rough road for a couple more years, and that'll be what it is. And I think we should do that. I think we should go ahead and do this design work.
Try to get a little better patching though than we got on 53rd. No square edges.
And Ty, with the bipartisan infrastructure bill, if we do the engineering, that puts us in a better position to see if anything comes up for that. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that's the benefit is if we can get started today on the engineering, that puts us 2 years ahead because we know it's going to be 2 years before we're ready to bid. And you're right. That's some of the discussion we had with WAMPO is they believe that they're going to get more money from the bill. They don't know how much. They haven't got it yet. But again, they were saying the projects that are ready, that's where the money will go. And so that was the other reason we thought, there could be bill funding that could come up in the next 2 years that would pay for it. And we would have our engineering and we'd be ready to go in 2 years to bid it. And if that doesn't happen, then we would look at the advanced construction, which again, possibility we could start construction in 2 years. But the key is we got to get the engineering done before we can do anything.
Yeah, the other thing about the bill to keep in mind is only 40% of the bill is grants, like we did for 53rd Street. We applied for a grant. Okay, only 40% of the bill is for grants. The rest of it comes out more generically through WAMPO and KDOT, and that's the other 60%. So there's a lot of money that will be forthcoming. We just don't know how much where. So we can't really say, oh, that's going to be there, but that is the difference there. The other thing I did learn today is KDOT said they only got 10 applications on the Safe Streets program throughout the state. So that's pretty cool because that puts us in a really powerful position. Don't get your hopes up because we don't know, but with only 10 grants throughout the entire state. And that's one of the reasons that I was wanting to get it done. And I'm glad you did it, that we got it applied, because I got the sense that most communities weren't ready. They were not ready to submit anything by September 15th. And I thought we could do it, and I'm glad we got it done. So,
Mr. Mayor, I agree wholeheartedly. I think a lot of people continue to ask questions, and I have heard advice: just get something in, just get it in. Don't worry, just submit something, try your best. Like seriously, I've heard that. And to kind of add on to engineering and the grants, it's competitive. And WAMPO has said that they expect their funding to double or triple. Now, what the final number is, we don't know, but the more competitive it's going to be competitive, and the more you can be further along in the process, the more competitive we'll be. So I think I 100% agree with getting going on the engineering. So we're in a good position like we are on 53rd, because I believe that engineering was done, and that will give us a leg up on our, now it's no guarantee, but it gives us a leg up on that.
It's probably going to start getting competitive to getting firms to do this type of engineering work, because everyone's going to be looking to get some engineering work done so that they're ready for the grants.
mm-hmm. I'm sure that's going to be the case.
So,
There's going to be a bottleneck there.
Do you envision we doing like we did with the Woodlawn and have engineering firms make proposals to a committee and then do a selection committee that way?
Yep. KDOT likes that. And I think we'll do similar to what we did with the Woodlawn, because we've had that discussion. Is it a 3-lane? Is it a 2-lane? What's it look like? So I think we just do what we did with Woodlawn and say first phase is to help us determine what it looks like. 2-lane, 3-lane, whatever. And then the next phase will be the actual design of that. So,
Okay.
Yep.
And to follow up on a comment Mayor said, I was curious what your opinion is on the KDOT administrating of projects and how Wichita's the only one that does that. I know there are several cities that take KDOT funding like Andover and whatnot, but I assume they don't administer those projects.
That is correct. They're not qualified KDOT to be able to administer, you have to be a certain size, have certain engineering capabilities, financial
Internal.
capabilities, et cetera,
Gotcha.
that we don't have. Derby, Andover does not have. Central County is qualified. They do administer some of their own projects, but the majority is administered through KDOT, as far as I know.
Gotcha. Just trying to think through that. So it sounds like that's not even a possibility if we considered it, hiring a staff member to be a KDOT admin. It doesn't sound like it's possible.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a bigger nut than we're ready to bite off.
I was just thinking, going forward, if this is going to be that ultra competitive, what other things can we be considering? Not saying you do it, but considering to make us more competitive in receiving funds and building projects, as we know we're going to have road projects going forward. So
Yeah, and I know that we have to plan for 2 years of design work probably, but it would sure be nice to see some proposals from people that maybe had ideas of how not to make that take 2 years.
It'd be great.
Yep.
So let's not.
That's good.
So I guess we shouldn't lead with that as a
Right.
qualification
don't hold them
or
back. Yeah.
an idea of how long it should take.
No, I think that's a good,
If you give them the time, they'll take it, right?
And
that's probably a good question.
too bad the roundabout at 45th and Woodlawn, that ship has sailed, unfortunately.
Sorry?
I said, too bad at 45th and Woodlawn, that ship has sailed. That will not be a roundabout.
It
So
won't be. And
There we had a lot of discussion on that.
there was, and honestly, the survey we did,
Yeah.
it did not come back favorable. But I think it was probably more because just the timing, people had no experience with it. Now they're getting some experience with it. So hopefully the sentiment is different, because once you get used to them, they're pretty cool. And they keep the traffic moving, which stoplights don't. They stop it.
I don't disagree. I'm pro roundabout, but that doesn't mean that it happens just because we're pro roundabout.
No, that's true.
So, okay, well, that's good. We got some direction there.
Okay, can I ask a 53rd Street question?
No, sorry.
Okay, fine. When it comes up later and it's important.
No, it's fine. This is a workshop. This is fine. Go right ahead.
I've driven down 53rd Street a couple of times and I noticed that one housing division is building berms and they look like they're awful far north to me. Are they out on our right of way?
Yes, they are, and that was actually very good timing. We have been working with them yesterday and today to move the berms back. They're not very happy about it. They're pushing back and want to keep the berms where they are, but we don't allow anybody else to have berms on city right of way, so they need to get theirs pushed back as well.
Okay, thank you. I thought that looked wrong, but
Yep.
I wanted to ask.
Yep. No, we talked about that today.
I had the same observation, and I was actually kind of a little worried about how the drainage would work with the way it was too. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that's being handled.
I didn't make that observation, but I've been down 53rd that much, so.
Nope, that's good
Okay,
observation, and we're working on that.
great.
Yep.
All right, so I guess we're ready to go to fireworks. Is that true?
Okay, so this came about, you remember a few months ago, Gary O'Neill, who represents the Lions Club, came before you and asked that you look at this. So a little bit of information, background information, is prior to 2009, fireworks were not allowed in Bel Aire to be sold or detonated. And so in 2009, the council at that time took up the battle. I mean, there was a lot of people for and against, and we had some packed houses here. And so anyway, it was actually, they adopted that to allow fireworks. They only allowed 4 permits per year, and they had to be affiliated with a nonprofit. So, and then they could only be detonated on the 4th of July. So you could sell them up the week prior to, but you could only shoot them off on the 4th. In 2015, the ordinance was revised, and the reason being is this is along Woodlawn, so Wholesale Fireworks purchased the building. And their concern was that, well, what if we couldn't find a nonprofit? We're spending this money to purchase a building and want to be able to get a permit. And so the ordinance was changed to address that. So it allowed, and another issue we had come up was having outdoor fireworks displays. And so there was a stipulation added that if like Catholic Care wanted to do a fireworks display for some reason, they could come and get a permit and do that. And then it removed the affiliation with nonprofits because of the fireworks. So I asked Jackie to kind of come up with some wording that would address the concern that if someone owns a building in town and they want to be ensured that they're going to get a fireworks permit, they can do that. But also that we have the Lions do a lot for the city, and that's their primary fundraiser is because of that. And we have other, I think the Boy Scouts have done one, different groups, nonprofits will do that. So I'll let Jackie kind of explain what her proposed language that would address that.
So the proposed language, if you look in your packet, it's in red. So basically it changes the qualification standards from, like Ty said, from anyone, any person, individual, to those who qualify. And to qualify, you must own or operate an existing business with a physical commercial location in Bel Aire, or you have to be affiliated with a financial, and financially support a nonprofit located in Bel Aire. So that would actually give the requirement that, you know, if you have a wholesale fireworks or another group coming in from out of town, they would have to negotiate with the nonprofit to determine what that appropriate financial support was, which, you know, in the past it's been, you know, you serve a few days at the fireworks tent and you get a percentage of sales. So that would kind of continue things as we had expected them to be prior to this change. So
Prior to which change? The 2015 change?
prior to the 2015 change, right, that removed that requirement that they be affiliated with a nonprofit.
Okay, I was going to say, I like the 2009 requirement, and I think if wholesale fireworks can't find a charity, they're not trying. There's too many of them out there that would love to give money.
Now, this allows it to be clear, the changes that are proposed allow it to be either a brick and mortar business. So if you're investing in establishing your business here, you're good. Or if you're not a brick and mortar business, you have to affiliate with a nonprofit.
I think they should affiliate with a nonprofit no matter what kind of building they have, tent or bricks.
That's a point of discussion, yeah.
Yeah. But with the wholesale fireworks, they're paying property taxes though.
Yes.
Right. So it
the
shouldn't have
city.
said wholesale fireworks. I should have used a different example because they would qualify because they own a brick and mortar business here.
Under your proposed
Right.
definition here.
Right. It would allow them to remain and do business as they currently anticipate doing it now.
But I think Councilmember Welch was suggesting that even though they have the brick and mortar building, they should find a nonprofit to work
Right.
with.
Yes, that was what I was suggesting, and that's what I'd like to see.
I think
Because I think that evens the playing field for everybody selling fireworks.
it is a little bit tricky in that I think like wholesale fireworks specifically, we probably license them as a business, don't we? They
We
have
do.
a business license to conduct their fireworks business here because they own a building.
They get a separate fireworks permit, if I remember correctly.
Right. Right. They can operate as a business doing whatever they do, but they can't
Until they sell fireworks.
Right.
Okay.
What those Was Up do, because they also have a brick and mortar business here in Bel Aire and they run a fireworks stand. So are they affiliated with a nonprofit on their fireworks stand?
I know
their
that
own
they've had
nonprofit.
Sunrise help them, but I don't know, what the arrangement is, how much or anything like that. So they do, but I think their concern was, well, what if we, couldn't or didn't? I suppose they could say we didn't want to. And so our discussion was that if they own a brick and mortar, they have to buy a business permit because they run jumping jump land or whatever, and then they pay property taxes.
Yes, but that didn't really answer the Raz guys out here, or whatever that go by that sell out of one of their trailer buildings.
Yep.
Yeah, and they're kind of, what's up?
Yeah.
And they are, Are they not their own charity? Are they not a charitable organization anyway?
No,
They're
Clinic
not.
in a Can is a for-profit business.
Yeah, but they do some charitable work, so I'm
They
not
do
sure where
some.
the line
Well,
They
is
do some.
exactly there with them.
Currently written, it would have to be a nonprofit that's based in Bel Air. So, and their nonprofit probably is based here because their business is based here as well.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that'd be something
They,
you may
they
want.
may already meet all the 2009 criteria.
Correct.
So Jackie, then to the fireworks stand, I think they were at 45th and Woodlawn, that I think they were using Northwest High School, some sort of athletic team. Would they not qualify since they're not a Bel Air based nonprofit?
Because, and so as written, it would be a nonprofit. So a high school, that's technically, I don't think they would.
Well,
If they're running it as a fundraiser, like maybe we need to consider this a little bit. If it's being run as a fundraiser for that, or they're making an agreement as a fundraiser, does that qualify as a nonprofit?
right. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, we would, we could adjust our definition for nonprofit in this case to include our schools, churches, whatever scope you all would want in that definition. So Northwest could continue to do it, or
Yeah,
Northeast.
'Cause, I mean, that's the same thing with the fireworks building that we're talking about. They do partner with Sunrise every year I can remember, and I assume that's a fundraiser for them.
Or are we
So-
actually talking about Heights, not Northwest? That's long
Actually,
ways.
the more I'm thinking about, I think even the Bel Air Lions have used Northwest to do the labor, but then we were the nonprofit that benefited because there's that liberty to make the deal however you want to make it.
Right.
I
Yeah,
just want to
well,
make sure, yeah, our language is really
I
clear.
assume you could hire anybody you want and pay them any rate you want, but the Lions would be the Bel Air based nonprofit.
Right.
And I can understand that there might not be enough Bel Air based nonprofits that maybe we should consider within a 25-mile range or some other limit that,
Has this been an issue? We didn't have enough nonprofits?
No. The only reason it was changed is because of the brick and mortar purchase, and then with What's Up Fireworks, they didn't have to, because they fell under this current. They didn't have to give their money to a nonprofit.
But there are enough nonprofits within Bel Air to support these 4
I would,
fireworks stands.
Yeah, I would think, with Catholic Care, you got churches, Lions,
Bel Air Recovery Center, is that
The-
considered a nonprofit?
I think
No,
that's
they're
for
for-profit.
but you got Isley,
Yeah.
Northeast Magnet. Those are all nonprofits.
Right.
So yeah, I would
yeah,
think.
we've got 4 schools if you just want to go with schools.
Yeah, Resurrection.
So there's no shortage of nonprofits.
My view on it, I think I'm okay with the proposed language as is. I think it is clean and simple.
I think it's good. I like it. The rule basically is you got to be a brick and mortar business or you got to affiliate with a nonprofit based in Bel Air. That's the simple, not the legalese definition, but that's her world.
And I'll be a little more explicit on nonprofit to include certain, parameters, like, because a nonprofit could be a tax definition or it could be a local definition, but I'll just explicitly say schools and
Yeah, we
Central
don't need to go with the IRS definition.
Right.
That's
Right.
not necessary.
I still don't like that brick and mortar gets an exception because of brick and mortar.
It could probably even include community organizations like the Chamber of Commerce and things like that could be included in our nonprofit definition. I don't know if they're a 501(c)(3) or
Right.
not.
right.
Yeah, but regardless whether they are or not, it
Yep.
still would be good to have that flexibility if they so desired to do it.
I agree. Keeping the money in the local community, if you open that up a little bit more, it probably helps that.
So are you saying brick and mortars don't have to share with the local community? Because that's what it says right now. They get to keep all of it.
Well, to me, the brick and mortar is the local community. They're paying taxes, and that is driving funds back to us. So I'm okay with the language as is. I would be open to not making it a tax definition and adding other community organizations.
Okay, I don't see the business paying that much taxes that it overrides what they would actually do for a nonprofit based on how much money fireworks tents bring in.
I can't help myself, so I'll say it. I don't love meddling with businesses under the same principle I had with, I love Catholic Care, but I didn't want to force people to be charitable through our policy. But I think of it along the same lines as it's been mentioned, where if you're a brick and mortar, you're paying taxes, and forcing a nonprofit, even though on paper I don't love that, it evens the playing field and keeps it here. Against that brick and mortar that's here paying taxes. That's how I justify this in my mind in the first place. So
If I go your direction, then I get leaning very much towards if you got a tent and you sell stuff for 2 weeks, I don't think you have to have a nonprofit associated with you. You've come in here, you've got a business license, you're doing business.
I think I have enough to be able to make a few amendments and get it back to you for the next council meeting.
Very well. Thank
Just
you.
one
Oh.
last question, I guess. The section of ordinance, this will change an ordinance. Is that true, or is this changing to policy?
An ordinance,
So it'll be part of the broader fireworks ordinance?
correct.
So I'll just bring this up because I think it's on topic. Do we have a current point of view on the enforceability of our fireworks ordinance? I know that we went from no fireworks to fireworks for one day. What I've observed the last couple of years is that I think that's just largely ignored.
Yeah.
And that bugs
it
me
is.
a little bit that we
It
have
is.
this ordinance that says there's only fireworks for one day, but there's fireworks for lots of days. And so I guess in my mind, we either need to be prepared and able to enforce an ordinance like that, or we need to change the ordinance to reflect what is actually feasible to enforce. But having a law on the books that isn't enforceable or we're not able to enforce and just kind of ignoring it, I guess, bugs me. And so if we're touching this ordinance, maybe we should talk about that.
I agree with you, and I think what we need to do is some enforcement. For the most part, I think the citizens adhere to the one day. But there's 3 people that are close to me that will do it even outside of these days of sales. 3 or 4 days after the 4th of July, they're still doing stuff, and nobody's going around and finding these people and putting a stop to them. And that's clearly outside of the scope. And I kind of think that's
So-
where Wichita lost it. They didn't do any enforcement, so people bring in stuff from everywhere. It doesn't matter if you got a 6-foot limit. People are throwing stuff 60 feet in the air for days on end, and nobody's doing anything about it.
And
And you got to start enforcing it if you want people to follow it.
if you remember the history with Wichita, they tried a strict enforcement and they got slapped down big time on that when they tried. But I'm not
That's 'cause they
saying don't enforce, but let's not go to the other extreme of strict
I think
enforcement.
Wichita just
that'd
let
be
it get
a
out of hand because it wasn't like that when I was a kid.
mistake.
So
Okay.
Wichita also
Uh,
tried something in the in between. They tried to do zones where you could shoot them off, and that kind of flopped too,
Yeah, I
where they were trying
remember
to
that one.
isolate where it was happening. But I agree with Justin. I think we need to review that, and I would be more along the lines of if we're letting them be sold, we should let them be shot off. So if we need to change the window of sale to match the window, because we have to expect once they buy them, they're going to shoot them off. So that's just my opinion. I agree with Justin. We should evaluate what we might want to change with the policy.
And I know there's a lot of opinions and emotions with fireworks. But for me personally, it doesn't bother me that they're shot off for multiple days. That doesn't bother me, but I know it is a concern for a lot of people. But I observed a number of times, great fireworks shows going on, and our police are busy, and they had to drive on by, and so I just think something isn't quite right about.
So
how
I
things
tend
are
to
set up.
agree with you, Tyler and Justin. I will tell you, some citizens have serious concerns with their animals, and the longer you extend that, the longer that concern goes on. I don't know that it's such an issue with children, but with animals especially it is. And the other issue that I think happens to us is that with our close proximity to Wichita, those who live within a couple blocks of Wichita don't know that those fireworks are being shot off in Bel Air, and we can't enforce our ordinance in Wichita, and they can't discern it. Neither can we. The only way you can enforce fireworks ordinances, and the police chief, I think, will tell you this, is I got to catch them in the act.
Mhm.
Okay. So if you know somebody's doing it and it's outside the parameters, you need to let the police know so they can get over there while it's actively going on.
Yeah, right.
But I know it's still hard
I
to
know
do.
somebody that has called the police and they've never shown up.
Or at least they didn't know that they should have.
No,
I
they
get
never
it.
showed
Okay.
up. 'Cause
Well,
they were
either way.
outside.
Okay.
And I think you missed it when you were talking about pets. Yeah, my pet doesn't like it, and I don't like it because my pet doesn't like it. But worse than that is these guys that have served overseas in wars, PTSD. I know some of these
Yeah,
guys
some
go
of them
down
do.
and hide in their basements to get away from it, and I don't want them down there for a week.
Yeah. I appreciate that too. That's certainly is an issue.
That's why I think we need to review it. And the length we sell should be reviewed too.
That's a good idea.
I think both ways, both things need to be discussed as part of the decision.
Yeah,
So
I
one,
agree. We don't have to have a whole week. They managed to sell a ton of them in one day, so I don't
Yeah,
know why we couldn't just
so-
have 2 or 3 days.
could we get any kind of information from some of the people that have operated these stands? Is what are those days they really make the sales? Because I almost bet the first day they're open, they don't make much sales.
Yeah.
And they probably make a whole bunch of sales on the 4th of July.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I think, and I think, Mayor, you kind of hit the nail on the head. We could change the sale dates, but you just go a mile south at Dillon's and they're going to buy them there and bring them back.
Yeah,
And
but what they
so-
buy at Dillon's isn't what we sell in Bel Air.
Well, I'm talking if there's and I don't know, but let's say there's a tent out in Dillon's parking lot, so there's somebody selling them there. So, they go a mile down. So then is our tent folks going to say, well, wait a minute, I can only sell for 3 days. So why would maybe I'll just go across into Wichita and just do it there, or go out in the county, go across the street.
What's the Wichita window for being fireworks?
I think theirs is the same as ours.
Same as
7
ours.
days. Yeah.
But I do think they sell different fireworks.
Yeah,
in
they won't
Wichita
let
city
you sell
limits.
anything that goes over 6 feet in Wichita, and
Right.
they police that.
Yep. Yep. And I think, back to enforcement, I mean, I certainly we can enforce, and it's back to you guys are going to get the calls because our officer's
Yeah.
going to stop, and these 10-year-olds are out in the parking lot and they're going to say, get your parents out here. You're shooting this. You can't be doing that. Parents come out. What's going on? Is that all you got to do is to come around and tell our kids we can't shoot fireworks? And, that's
I know, but
that's what they run
that's
into,
the job.
and we can do it.
Yeah.
But you're probably going to get a call or emails.
Yeah.
And as long as you're supporting that, then, our officers can be more diligent. It's
And that's what I'm saying, where
Okay.
Wichita lost it because they didn't enforce it.
Mhm.
And if we don't enforce it, then we're going to have people shooting stuff for the whole week or more.
And maybe that's the right
It won't
answer.
matter what our rule is.
Yeah, I agree. We need to do enforcement, and we may need to make sure we have a reasonable rule that's enforceable.
And we're not going to get everybody the first year.
Nope.
If you get 2 or 3 and the word gets out that it costs them a bunch of money, you're going to have 20 less people next year.
That's true.
Mr. Mayor, I will say the efforts to enforce certain things are more challenging. And this
Yeah,
presents
is
one of
one.
those because you would need to catch them doing it. And then you would want to bring in, or you'd want to bring in witnesses. So then you're setting up future court dates. You're having officers and people and neighbors writing a report about what they heard, maybe what they saw. It's more of a long form enforcement. Speeding is kind of nice because you see them, it's a quick process. You're moving people through the process quickly. With this, you're going to get a lot of calls and have to do quite a bit more follow-up and more officer time on this sort of case. You might even have a trial, because it wasn't me when you heard it. It was that neighbor over there. It's just the echo,
I think you're going to
So-
have the same situation though. If somebody calls in and says, my neighbor's doing fireworks, and the police come by and they don't see anything, that's the end of it. But if they come by and they see that you've been shooting fireworks in your driveway, that's the time to stop and do something right then when they see it.
Right.
And they can find that. And I can find it when I see them going up in the air. I've got time to drive down there and see who's doing it, because they'll keep doing it for 20, 30 minutes. It's not like it's a one-shot deal.
Right. Yeah. I just want to make sure your discussion appreciated some of this is a lot less like a traffic stop and a lot more like a fuller investigation more often than not.
Well, but that's what I think it's more like a traffic stop.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of people speed down Woodlawn. They don't all get stopped.
Right.
But some of them get stopped, and they know that Bel Aire polices Woodlawn. So most people are a little more careful driving through Bel Aire,
Yeah.
because Bel Aire has that reputation.
So you're saying officers spend that time looking for this and responding to calls on fireworks during that season or during that week? or whatnot?
Sometime.
Okay.
We do a lot of driving around neighborhoods. There ought to be some time when they're not doing something more important,
Mhm.
that they're just driving around, or they're sitting there having their donut or coffee, whatever, taking a break, like they're allowed to do. I'm not making fun of them for, I know it sounds bad, but there's times when they're just sitting there, or they're filling out paperwork or something, and they might see something over there, and they say, well, it's going to take me 2 minutes to finish this.
Right.
And if I see the guy still going in 2 minutes, I'm going to drive over that way and see if I see who it is.
Right.
I can appreciate John's comments to the point where most of the citizens are following. There are just probably a handful of people that are really abusing this. So I think we do gotta belligerently shooting off for 30 minutes a week before July 4th. So I do think we have to put it a little bit in perspective. The comment about them not having something to do, I bet that's the busiest week for them, because there's tons of emergency calls that come in because of this exact reason, which is unfortunate, but it does happen. And so I think there's a balance there, though. And I think if we can sit down and really think about our policy and think about, and I can appreciate what you said, Ty, about, well, that'll change this and we'll shift that. I think we got to think about what's going to have the most impact. And if shortening our sale window and matching it with our shooting off is the best, then maybe that's what we do, or maybe there's something different.
And I know we're not going to solution this tonight, so I don't know how much time we want to spend on it, but I mostly just wanted to talk about it. And I do think that we should get our chief's input and maybe some officers' input. They may even have some ideas. They're the ones that are dealing with this. I know they're not just sitting and eating coffee and donuts. I'm not saying that at all.
I'm not saying that either. I'm just saying, I know that they do that.
I
and
know-
they
I know
stop
how-
for lunch and have a sandwich or whatever they're doing. There's times
We
when-
run a lean department. Our chief has told us about that, and I just want to make sure that what we have is something that's reasonably enforceable. And I'm worried that right now we've created a situation where it's not.
And I think that our shooting off period is actually a little tight. I really do like the idea of bringing things a little bit closer, because people have complained that it's like, oh, if I'm not available that night, or if I've got a party, I'd like to be able to have maybe 2 nights to do it. But then, like you said, shortening the sale window so you're not sitting here with all these great fireworks, tempted to blow them off.
And I can associate with that. And I don't want to be the killjoy. I like fireworks myself. I don't want anybody to not be able to do fireworks. But there are some nights when we shouldn't be doing fireworks.
Well, and I
if
don't.
the 4th of July is on Friday, a lot of people have to go to work on Friday, and they're staying up. I've had stuff keep me up till 2 or 3 in the morning when I was working. And I go to work the next day and I was ready to kill anybody I met because I hadn't got enough sleep, right?
Well, and I agree, because we don't have any pets, and we don't have PTSD or anything like that. But I mean, it's like a war zone some years for 3 days.
Some years.
And
it
people
is.
have a right to rest well and in their homes. So I agree.
Do we increase the number of officers on duty on any time around the 4th of July for that reason, because of additional trauma? Well, you have additional injuries, but you also have.
Right. I don't know that I don't think we deliberately, I think the chief goes out, which he's typically not out in the evenings and stuff. So
Right.
I think we have a little bit more presence, but I don't think we bring in additional officers.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if that's called for. I'm not trying to micromanage the police. I let them,
Certainly
think
not
he does what he's
talking
doing.
about it on July 4th.
So it sounds like you want us to do a little bit more research on that piece of
Yeah.
it, the sales,
Yeah, let's look at,
detonation.
and it might be good just to ask a couple of the vendors, what are their sales days like? Because that may help define
Yep.
what that window is. you
Okay.
know.
And one other thing I brought up before, I don't know if it'd help or not, but what if we posted the dates for detonating the fireworks in the firework tents? Right there at the cash registers, just put the rule, Bel Aire does not allow fireworks except on July 4th.
Or
And at
when they
least
do
that way,
allow it.
nobody could say, I wasn't informed that.
Or make it a flyer they hand out with fireworks sale. Comes out with your receipt.
Right.
These are the rules.
Okay.
There you go. Except they won't read that.
They can't say they didn't have opportunity. I mean, you can lead. Yeah. Right. You lead the horse to water. You can't make them drink. So if they won't read it, they won't read it.
I'm just thinking if it's in big enough print and you're standing there in line, you're going to read it.
Well, might be some of that. Maybe a little bit of both. In communication, there's no one solution that fits all.
Yep.
You just got to use every target you can hit. So maybe both of that is good.
Okay.
I do agree with the comment made by Emily. I have heard people say, "Are you kidding? We only need to shoot off one night." I think if we open that up a little bit, I think that would help, even a little bit.
Oh, I think you're
Sorry. I just agreed with what Emily had said. I think I have heard people. I totally appreciate the PTSD and the pets. There's all things to consider, but I have heard "Are you kidding me? We can only shoot off one night." So I think that there's something there that we could evaluate. And like Justin said, we're not going to solve it tonight.
We'll never solve it. This is one of those issues you just don't solve.
You're not going to make everybody happy. That's the way it is. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So,
Would you still like to see the sale permit qualification come to you next week, or do you want to table that until we address the whole fireworks
let's
issue?
do the whole thing.
Okay.
Because there's no urgency here.
Rush.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't have to have this until March of next year anyway, right?
Well, no, we need to have this in like probably December, because I think the permit application opens in January. I think
Okay.
Melissa
All
may
right.
start taking it then.
So we got a little time, not a lot of time, but a little bit. Yeah.
Right.
I'd like to see the whole thing.
Is that feasible?
Yeah, sounds like what I'm hearing is opening it up to a couple nights, maybe amending the permit to put more information out about about the rules in Bel Aire. And I think bringing that to you won't be too hard. So maybe the first meeting in November with Ty's research, you might consider it.
Okay. Very good. Like I say, we won't solve it, but I think we got some direction.
Okay.
Council awards.
So our last topic is council awards. I think this came up when you were considering the council term limits and terms. There was discussion about this. So a little background on that. State statute actually requires wards for cities of the second class. In 1998, the city council chartered out from the wards. So that's why we don't have wards, but they are required unless you charter out. Wards are created using population. Sedgwick County works with the city to create those wards based on population and voters. Terms would still be staggered, so nothing would change there. 4 years for council, it's 4 years for the mayor as well. Mayor would still be elected at large, so you would just have five wards. And so really all you'd have to do is rescind that original charter ordinance. And there is, would there be a petition period for that as well? For the rescinding? So you would just simply rescind it, and then there'd be a 60-day protest period for that.
So I had a little discussion earlier today with Lyle Ackerman, who was the mayor who signed that ordinance at the time, and said, why did they change that? He said they didn't. what happened is Bel Aire became a city of the second class from a city of the third class. And that's when it came into play that they had to address it. So that's why
so they just didn't-
1998, they chartered out of the wards because they never did have wards. And now they had to do something with it because the statute says the city of second class has to have wards.
Good. That's great, because I was wondering that.
So would we have just 2 wards or would we have to have 3 wards?
So you've
I
got
think the
5
statute
council
says
members.
at least
you have
4.
5.
That'd be a really big council.
I don't know that that's necessarily true. That I don't know what the law or statute says, but there's several that have wards and then have at-large members in addition to the
Yeah.
wards. So I don't know
So you
if
could do that.
somebody
yeah.
could answer that, like what's actually would be required if we did rescind the charter.
So you would be required to have not less than 4, but you could have more. So you could have at least 4, you could have 5, and then you could have a number of at-large members as well.
And there's 2 members per ward, if I'm reading this right.
Not necessarily.
That's the way Park City does theirs. I do
Yeah.
know that, but
So,
it seems like they got a lot of people on their council.
so for instance, Wichita has
You're right.
6 districts, so they have 6 representatives, and they review it every 10 years. Hutchinson has 4. Park City has 4, but it sounds like they have 2 members
2 per
per
ward.
ward.
Mhm.
So you
Yep.
could go
That's
to
why
the
they have so
minimum
many.
or more.
Right.
Yep.
So I also talked with the mayor of Hazel about redistricting, and he says it's not required. He says he sees some imbalance in his own city, and he's thinking they may need to do that. I'm not trying to put words in his mouth what he's going to do because I have no idea, but he does see that theirs are significantly unbalanced simply because of where the growth has been in their city.
Yeah.
And so now they got some wards that are quite a bit larger than others. So,
Mr. Mayor, to add to that, I visited with somebody this weekend while we were at the conference and kind of asked a gentleman that is a councilman and they have wards, and he had the same comment that they need to reevaluate redistricting. And one of the big comments he made was the population growth and then also the commercial areas versus the residential area. Like it sounds like it's something that I think every city that has wards struggles with. And I think that's something that we definitely would need to consider, but it's not something to necessarily, not move forward with wards, but it's a consideration. And I think it's a common theme.
So I was, and I don't know, because part of what was brought up at the council retreat was concerns about campaigning. So I'm a committee woman for my party, and I had an opponent this primary which is in August, and I was gone for part of July, and I felt the pain in 100-degree weather getting to my 539 houses. And 5 steps versus 3 steps makes a difference when you're on house 478. So I can appreciate that from a campaigning standpoint very much. I personally am not interested in putting any more arbitrary, we just put, term limits on, and I can see the benefits of that. And that was overwhelmingly supported by citizens on that survey. Right now, I don't want to, if Justin and John live on the same block, I don't want to have to pick between 2 people. And I don't think we're there yet geographically where I feel like, oh gosh, if you live at 45th and Rock, you're going to have a lot different perspective than at 53rd and Oliver or whatever. And then the last thing I was going to say, yeah, I'm just not for this right now. Maybe and then I don't think it's an issue. I've only been here 5 months, but just talking to other council members, I don't think we're getting overwhelmed representing our constituents at large. That would be another reason why if we were having difficulty really representing or responding to citizens well. So right now, I think it's okay being 5 at large positions.
yeah, the other thing I'd be really concerned about a little bit is the demographics of if you did wards. We have certain areas that are very dominant in duplexes, and those tend to be more rental, and there tend to be a lot more turnover in those areas. That makes it a real big challenge for somebody who happened to be that ward to keep up with that, and for the citizens to keep up with who's the representative, because they're more in and out. Doesn't mean that there aren't some people that have been there for years, and there are people who have been there for years. I know of some of them, but I also know that the tendency is that they're in and out. I saw some data over the weekend that Bel Aire is 86% home ownership, which is just awesome compared to other communities. 55% is the norm is the average for the country. I think I saw some data Hayesville presented this afternoon at the WAMPO meeting. They're 77%. So we're just right now we're pretty awesome in that area, but we do have that other 14% that tends to be in one area right now. Now, I don't know if that'll be the way it is in the future, but that's where it is today, I think. So,
Mr. Mayor, I will point out that that may be a reason to have wards. I'm not necessarily pro ward or against ward. I'm kind of on the fence of whether or not we need that at this time. But I think having somebody that advocates for a specific part of town would maybe keep it from becoming just duplexes, and they may have more say on what the development of that part of the city looks like versus an at-large member that doesn't live in the duplexes. I tend to see both sides of that. I can see how having a person designated for the ward that's not developed could have an impact, a positive impact on how that ward becomes developed, and could rally support for that. So I don't know where we'll end up with this, but I do want us to kind of keep both sides of it kind of front and center, because there's definitely pros to both sides.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the fence on it, and I don't remember. I may have even made some comments about this in the prior meeting that got it on the agenda here, but I think that it can be really tricky to have council members that only represent a certain part of the city, because what you can end up with is that council member only thinking about their city, and the rest of the council members only thinking about their part of the city, and nobody feeling like they are really accountable or representing the whole city. And right now, everyone that sits up here needs to feel like they represent the whole city. And so everyone's carefully contemplating every issue because they're representing the city at large, whereas a number of issues may only actually impact certain parts of the city, and you may get council members that zone out for those discussions, or they don't feel like they have, any skin in that game, and so they're less interested in contributing into that discussion. You may get a lot more situations in the future where there's an issue and it really only affects one part of the community, and so whoever that council member is, they advocate, but they're ultimately outvoted because everyone else feels like it's not going to matter for their areas and it doesn't benefit them.
Yep. Yeah.
But at the same time, as we get larger, it's going to be harder and harder for every council member to be thinking about all of the city all at one time, and to adequately represent everyone and to make those connections with the people in their areas.
And that's exactly why Wichita has these district committees, because even the council members find that their area is so large they can't keep up with all the needs of the people. So they have district committees who help them.
I think it's going to be a long time before Bel Aire gets so big that we can't consider the whole city as each individual up here on the council. The one drawback I do see is what Justin was complaining about is as the city grows, it affects how you can campaign.
Right.
And it's a problem. And I thought about that. And then I looked at how Wichita people campaign, and they don't go door to door. They send out mail and they just hope somebody votes for them. I don't think they're anywhere near as hands-on as Bel Aire people are. The Bel Aire Council, I think, really cares about whatever all the citizens want and is willing to talk to the citizens. And I think any one of the council members we've had for ages was willing to consider the best things for the whole city.
And I thought about that too, because in some ways, at least from my perspective, it makes you better, because you can't just care about it at campaign season when you can hit every door. You have to always be on it, because you're always campaigning, because you're not going to have time to go to every door necessarily unless you start, X amount of months ahead of time.
You can start January anytime you want. If you want.
Anytime you feel for, you're up for election next year, you
Right.
get to decide when
Yeah.
or
that's true.
if.
So
Okay.
just some of my comments, just because I've talked to city managers that have wards and the challenges they have from a staff perspective. So what's interesting is, so I put stars where you all live. And that's kind of neat to see that
That's what those are.
nobody's in one specific area. I mean, obviously, all of our growth is this is where all of our development is. We got some new stuff happening here, but so everybody's kind of spread around there, and which is kind of neat. I mean, that shows that you all aren't just in the same block or the same neighborhood. If you did wards, so if we did 5 wards, it's going to be split up again. These are going to be smaller wards because there's a lot of people. Over here, we don't have any development, so they're going to be much larger because there's less people over there. So you're going to have a bigger ward. Now it's going to be empty. The interesting thing that the mayor pointed out is like these wards over here, if it was designed this way, there's a lot of duplexes over in this area. So a lot of rentals. And so, you've got to find somebody within this ward that's going to run. And if 50% of them are rentals, that could limit the possibility of who you're going to get to run in that area. So the questions that I have is, is there a desire? Are you hearing from the public we should have wards or not? Or is it just something we're talking about? Yes, there could be an instance where you have 2 council members live on the same block or in the same neighborhood. That can happen. But as I think Justin mentioned, are these neighbors going to seek improvements in their area of the city versus the rest of the city? And as long as I've been here, I've never seen that. Everybody's been like you. It's all about what's best for the city as a whole. I've never heard anybody say, well, my neighborhood, I want something in my neighborhood. So it gets back to, you've got a ward, and is it going to be hard to find somebody in here? I think it was Emily said you could have 3 over here want to run and nobody here. So then no one runs. So then are you appointing somebody from that ward? That means you got to go find somebody in that ward to appoint. So the other issue that concerns me from the management standpoint, the budgeting standpoint, is we know that this is the older area of Bel Aire, so they have older streets. We're spending $1.4 million this year for these streets because they're all old and deteriorating. These are all new streets. These are all concrete streets. Probably aren't going to need any kind of improvements done for 10 years. So are the people in those wards now going to say, well, you're spending millions over here and you're not doing anything in our neighborhood? So what do we want? Well, what if we were to add some amenities? How about, you're doing your streets over here. We want a splash pad, and we want a new park because that's $100,000 or $200,000. You're spending $300,000 on roads in this ward and $400,000 in this. We don't need any road work, but by golly, we want a new park and a new splash pad that's $400,000. So that seems fair. And so that's the concern as staff. We have, okay, now all of a sudden we're losing focus of the whole city. We're looking at just different wards, and are we putting the right amount of money? What do we do for police protection? Do we take 3 wards and then say we'll have 3 different beats? And so we'll have police officers in different wards to make sure that you've got police there in your ward when you want it. Those are questions that we as staff have to be considered, because now we have people representing a ward, and are we giving them what they want for their ward? And so again, that's some of the stories that I've heard from city managers about a ward is, are you spending the same amount in every ward? Are you giving the same services in every ward? And how does that look?
The more we talk about this, the less that I like the idea.
Okay, cut.
And again, and then the mayor actually reached out and found out why it was chartered out, and it really wasn't. Has there been a problem because of the council members not represent? I have never seen that since I've been here. We've had great council members that look after the city. And again, this is your policy decision. It's just from our staff standpoint with wards, we're afraid that it can kind of splinter the city. And then are we giving everybody the same amount of money and the same amount of services? And it makes our job harder. And that's just concerns that we have with wards.
Jackie, if and when we cross over the 15,000 mark and become a first class city, are we required to have wards at that point?
I'm not sure, my gut tells me because wards are required at as you're only related to your city size, that you could charter out of it because it's not uniformly applicable. Every city in the state doesn't have to have wards. So I want to check it on paper, but I'm pretty sure you can charter out of it as well.
We got a long ways to go.
I was just
It's got to be
curious.
15,000 or more. So, okay. Other issues. I do have another issue, and I don't know how much we want to talk about it tonight, but I want to. We had a citizen come up here, the last two city council members, and she made several good points I think we need to consider. And my thought on this started with parks, and we had a developer who was pleaded with by our planning commission to put parks in and still refused. And we had nothing in the ordinance that said they had to do that. And I was very disappointed and actually voted against that plot because I did not like the fact that we had no parks in that area. And so I would like to see us entertain what would a requirement for parks be in new neighborhoods? And what is that? What makes sense there? This citizen also talked about trees and grasses and fertilizers and a lot of things. And, she's right. We shouldn't be tearing down trees just to mow them down. Okay. And if we do take them down, we should be replacing them with trees. I think it would even be wise for us, and I don't know to what degree you want to do this, to look at grasses that use less water. I think it would be maybe that's more of a thing you do. You encourage home HOAs and others to adopt grasses that use less water, and there are several out there, and fescue is not one of them, which is the most common. Okay. But that's the most common. I'm actually experimenting with one myself right now, and the experiment hasn't gone well so far, but we're giving it a second try this fall, so we'll see how it works out. But places where it has taken well, it's a very nice grass. I really like it. I like it better than the fescue. It's softer. It's just a nice grass, but it didn't, because of a comedy of errors. There are a lot of bare spots. So we're going to see if we can't fix that this fall. So anyway, but I do think it would be wise for us to try to look at what makes sense. And I don't know if that's a planning commission thing that they should be involved in that discussion, or the council should look at that or give input to. I don't know. I'm kind of looking for some guidance here on what makes sense to pursue this, because I'm not going to tell you the answers here because I don't have the answers. I just understanding that there's a concern, and I agree with the concern. Okay.
Yeah, I brought that up at the time when we voted on that plot, that I didn't like the park, and I thought we should have some kind of regulations that govern that. And I would say that's probably something council addresses, not the planning commission. Planning commission doesn't really get to make rules. They just enforce the ones that are on the books, as far as I know.
But I think they can advise us on things.
Yeah, they could advise us.
And that's all I was looking, if that made sense, that they would do that. And I'm looking for Ty and Jackie to kind of give us guidance on that.
Yeah, there's a couple ways we can do that. First of all, we're looking at, we need to update our comprehensive plan. And your comprehensive plan kind of outlines, that you want, for every 100 acres of development, you want a 10-acre park or land set aside for a park or something. That's just a guidance that the planning commission and council would agree on. And then it would be in our comprehensive plan. And then the next step would then be in our planning process. Then we would say, a developer comes and says, we've got 80 acres we're going to plat, and our comprehensive plan says you need to have 10 acres in there. And then that's part of that process as well. So it would be input from the Planning Commission and the council.
And to your talk about grasses, I would be in favor of some test plots, maybe right out here by City Hall. 2 or 3 different kinds of grass that we think are good for Kansas. Have the city crews put that in. They can regulate that they all get the same amount of water. Any resident can drive by and see the fescue's dead. The Bermuda's going gangbusters. and Jim's new brand new grass, whatever it is nice and soft if they get out and walk on it. Whatever, they can compare. And then people can see stuff.
Bermuda's taking over.
I
I
don't
would-
live in an HOA neighborhood, but I think what I understand is some HOA neighborhoods will require a certain type of grass or prohibit others. I think a lot of them require fescue, which
They
is
do.
one that
And
takes a lot of water. And
I believe we could
High
override
maintenance.
that if we wanted to as a city.
Yeah, one of the
And
things about
I know that the homeowners over there at Willow Bend required wood roofs for a long time until a bunch of their residents finally realized that houses were catching fire from their neighbors because they had wood roofs. And they finally got together and said, this is stupid. Let's get rid of this. It's expensive and it's a fire hazard.
And it's no longer necessary. I mean, you get the same
Insurance.
aesthetics out of a lot of the other building materials today, but
Yeah.
30 years ago, that wasn't
Well,
the
that was
case.
the problem. There were much better things you could put on your roof. The clay tiles, the steel stuff, others. There
Right.
were other options that were available, but they couldn't use them.
insurance has a big thing to do with the old cedar shake roofs. But as
Yes.
far as John, your idea of the city planting the grass and all that, I think one thing we got to be careful about is dictating what type of grass that, that's an HOA thing. And I kind of feel like one of the reasons why it's an HOA thing is it becomes who's going to deal with it when the neighbor next door has weeds and grass in their yard that they don't like. And to me, I don't think the city should be policing that. That sounds like a disaster to me. That's my opinion. But I agree with all that's being said with water conservation is a good thing. I think requiring parks is a good thing, but I'd also make sure that we have a plan for when we're going to require parks. How are we going to take care of these parks? Because one thing that aggravates me more than anything is when I see cities, especially large ones, that spend money on landscaping and irrigation systems. And then
Use 'em.
2 years later, there's no landscaping. It's all burned up. The grass is gone. Like, it's like, what in the world? So we've got to be careful. If we put a policy in place, we definitely need to be willing to spend the money to maintain it. So just figured I'll get off my soapbox, but I wanted
You're-
to make sure that
You're
was,
absolutely right. I agree with you 100%.
Drives
We've
me
got to
nuts.
maintain what we've got.
yes.
And if we expand what we've got, we got to maintain that as well.
We
We've
can
had that
limit,
discussion, right?
we
Drives
can
me
limit
nuts.
stuff going forward. There are cities around the country that have done that. If you look at like, oh darn it, gambling mecca of
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas, they have gone in and they've said no more fescue. You can't plant fescue anymore. And we will even pay you to take fescue out, is how adamant they are because of the water usage. And we should be looking at the same kind of things. This is just wasteful. Fescue does great some years here and other years like this year. My yard's almost totally brown. Okay. And it's going to probably stay that way until next spring when I figure out what to do because it's just dead.
I will tell you this, I don't want to scare anybody that we have a water shortage because we certainly don't have a water shortage, but CCUA says between us and Park City, we are pulling so much water, they can't keep the towers full. They're just constantly trying to keep the towers full. You think, well, they fill up overnight. Well, they don't because they're being drained so quick and we're keeping up, but it's a challenge for them to keep
There-
that balancing it.
there may be a really significant public infrastructure cost if we don't find some different alternatives.
Yeah, down the road. Yeah, I mean, this is an unusually dry summer. It will probably return to better weather, but I don't have that crystal ball when that will happen. I remember my grandmother telling me about the Dust Bowl days, and it was a good 10 years. It was dry.
It's a long time.
So so I'm not saying we're having that. I don't know. I don't have the crystal ball, but we do know weather is cyclical, and it has its good times and it has its bad times. So Okay. Anyway, I just think it would be good to look at some policies there. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you are draconian about it. It says you will not plant fescue. Maybe you say, these are the preferred grasses, and here's what we're going to do to encourage you to use those preferred grasses.
Right.
I don't know. I'm not saying what makes sense
Maybe
there
we have
because I don't
different
know.
water rates for lawns. That
Mr.
have those.
That's exactly
That
what I was
motivate-
going to say. I don't want to
that motivate.
like lecture people, but I would rather just have match water rate usage, which I know we can't put a meter on everybody's thing. And we do an average over the first, December, January, February. And then no matter how much you use, you pay the same rate as you water throughout the summer. Is that correct?
No, that's for the sewer rate. The water is based on your use.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I wish it was that way.
What's that?
I wish it was that way.
Okay.
You should have saw my water.
So,
bill
so
this
you're,
summer.
so Justin, just so I understand, you're saying to just charge more if you go over X amount.
Well, yeah. So you could apply the same system and say, hey, if you go over your winter water utilization, the rate is a higher rate per 1,000 gallons, during the summer.
Yeah.
Didn't we
So,
used to
Mr.
have something like that?
We have something like that in the sewer right now.
So
But
we
it's-
have
it's
that.
Not identical, but similar.
So the sewers, we average your water usage for 3 months during the winter, and then that's what you pay. The water is based on usage, and we have tiers. So if you use 0 to 5,000, you pay one rate. And then for the next 5 to 10, you pay a different rate, and then it keeps going up. So the thing I think where Justin's going is that we need to look at those higher, because most people, average house will use, not watering, we use 2 to 5,000 gallons a month.
Yeah, more specifically, my proposal would be a more complicated way to calculate rates at an individual account level.
Oh, individual account.
Similar to how you do the sewer, right?
Oh,
Your sewer-
gotcha.
I'd be fine if we just did if you go over 15,000 gallons, we skyrocket the rate kind of deal,
Yeah.
'Cause-
There's maybe some simpler solutions. I think we'd have to have Ted pull some data for us to see what those numbers and cutoffs and percentages of people falling in those ranges would be. But to the mayor's point, I think there are policy things that we can do to, encourage without being so heavy-handed and requiring
Mr.
these
Mayor,
types of things.
Mr. Mayor, were you thinking? So I know K-State Extension has a lot of research. I know UAC has a yearly update to their water management plan. I can't remember the exact name. Are you thinking they would do some research and come back and kind of present some recommendations, or how would that go?
I think that research has already been done. We just don't need to go get it. K-State has some. I think Oklahoma has also done some of that
Yep.
research as well.
Yep.
In fact, I've run across some of that in Oklahoma. Don't know which university, and maybe it's OU, maybe it's Oklahoma State. I just don't remember, but they've done a lot of research, especially in the buffalo grass area.
I like buffalo grass, but it doesn't look so great in the winter.
No warm season grass does. All
Right.
warm season goes brown during
Yeah.
cooler
Right.
months. It's just the way it is.
In my yard's, what's there is still Bermuda, and it may end up being totally Bermuda by 2 years from now.
Doesn't take long. That's a never-ending battle.
It just depends on what months you want it to be brown, but to everybody's concept of water conservation, that's the kind of the goal. And I think there is a lot of things we can be doing.
I like that comment. It depends on what months you want it to be brown. I like that.
True. That's absolutely true.
So if we could look at some ideas, proposals, and talk about those when you have
What-
some ideas.
One of the other things that I think it was Rebecca brought up was the fertilizer issue.
Yeah, that's a runoff issue.
The
of
runoff issue, which I
fertilizer.
was
If you reduce
Googling
the water
that.
usage, you'll reduce the runoff, right?
Yeah. No, exactly. But I don't know if we even know what fertilizers we as a city are applying to our property. That might be something easy that we could look into just from our usage.
I think one of the things she was suggesting too is that we have a grass, can't think of words again, a grass
like a
buffer
buffer?
between the
Yeah.
ponds and other things,
Oh,
so that
yeah,
it would
some-
filter the runoff before it
Yeah.
got to the pond.
Yeah, so I visited with an engineer actually after these comments were made and kind of asked what our best practices, because the ponds that are in our area are pretty similar to what you'll see on new developments. They generally don't have plantings immediately around it, although in our city we do kind of have that in some spots naturally. We have wooded areas. And some of the comments he made were there's pros and cons. I mean, obviously, if you start turning it into a wilderness, then that brings wilderness. So then you've got coyotes and you've got hawks and then you start getting children or pets attacked. And so he was trying to say, hey, it's great. I mean, that's great for the native, part of it, but it has cons. So there's a balance there. I think what she was saying, I appreciate it. And it
Right.
certainly would help protect the ponds and the environment, but potentially at the detriment to those others. So it's tough. I can see both sides of it. That's a tough issue.
Right.
I don't know that there's a good solution to making both sides of that coin happy. I just don't.
A guy that might have a lot of good input on that is Jason Gish, because that's what he's done. He designed the landscape along hillside between 21st and 17th. And if you've ever driven down there, that median, he designed all that landscape. It's really nice. And I think he probably found that balance in there. I don't know. If you see his yard, you'll see similar type of things. So, yeah. But I'm not saying he's the only guy, but he's just one we know and lives right here in Bel Aire. So, okay. Anything else we need to or should discuss this evening? If not, I will call us adjourned and we will see everybody next Tuesday. Thank you.